Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations Aloud, where we have everyday conversations with everyday people about geopolitics, economics,
Agree,
society, and
bro.
culture. And today we're discussing the impact of the Russia Ukraine war on Europe. And we're joined today by Blaz, who is a leadership coach who has a military experience in Slovenia. He's based in Slovenia. Welcome to the show, Blaz.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. So, Russia-Ukraine war, it's been 2 years now. It started on 24th February 2022. How have you personally felt about the news and events that of that kind of invasion?
So I can still legitimately tell you, I still remember it when it started. I woke up, I was working like 12 plus hours days at that point, since we had like some big projects at work. I just took my phone and I was like, shit, it's beginning. And at the beginning, right, I was probably like one of the people that thought, hey, it's going to be over pretty soon. Like I was really misinformed by the might, in quotation marks, of the Russian military and about how strong or not strong the Ukrainian military was, right? And, we're still here like 2 years later and the war is just is still going on. But yeah, it's profoundly affected me because especially understanding history, since I am a military history major at the US Military Academy, nothing good comes from this. It's a horrible war that should never have started.
Yeah. And you said that you were misunderstood about kind of the
Yeah.
Russian might. What did you mean by that?
So everybody was always talking about it like the second strongest military in the world. It has vast amounts of resources that it actually has. And it's just going to stomp over Ukraine as soon as Putin says so.
Hmm.
And I think that we all tend to believe their propaganda. And I also do think that the Russians believe their own propaganda that that's actually going to happen, which if you look at how they went towards Kiev and all of that from Belarus, you were able to see that they didn't expect any resistance and that they got beat up really badly at, Kiev and then Kharkiv and everywhere else pretty much that Ukraine decided to attack.
Yeah, it felt like they thought that this was going to be an easy, quick
Hmm.
invasion. I'm not sure if they expected the reaction that Europe had, cutting off, for example, the gas,
Yeah.
which Europe is dependent on, especially Germany. When you think about Slovenia, which is where you're
Yeah.
based, do you feel things have changed in terms of, one, in terms of the economy, but two, in terms of how people are discussing safety and security and the future in Slovenia?
So personally, I don't think so. Because in Slovenia, we have a strange phenomenon because we're a small country, 2 million in Central Europe, and never have we ever felt endangered or threatened by anybody around us. Even when I was in the military, it was like, you know, why do we even need the military? This has been a big conversation in Slovenia. We're too small. Why do you need the military? It's a waste of resources, a waste of time. Let's just forgo the military and put that 1% of our GDP to education or something
Mm.
else. So that's kind of the first thing, right? The second thing is, since we were part of the former Yugoslavia, so the most northern part, people still, for some reason, like for a few reasons, they still see that, we're still brothers with Russians, and, former Yugoslavia was actually really good because it provided us prosperity and all of that, which is not true. Like, we couldn't get jeans in the 80s or 70s. You had to smuggle them from Italy. But people still believe that, which is unfortunate, right? And yeah, because we're Slavs, so those are our Slavic brethren, we kind of tend to stick together. It is fortunately the older population that still believe this, and they will get phased out eventually. But still, it's like that nostalgia. Oh, we were a part of something bigger before and all of that thing. And also that kind of goes into, we don't want to be that much in the West, NATO and all of that. And we have a really big divide between East-West at the moment, with West is winning, of course, but yeah, not as much
Yeah,
as I would
that's
like.
interesting. And so the divide, is actually an age divide, like the old generation want to be with the East and the younger generation want to be with the West? Is that how it is?
The majority, yes. You will have some, and like I would call them radicals like that,
Yeah.
still think that it was a mistake that Yugoslavia was split up, that we would be way stronger in the former country, and that, Russia at this point has a lot more to offer than anybody else in the West.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, sometimes a lot of people say Russia has something to offer. I'm always not sure about what that is. What do you people kind of say that Russia has to offer, really?
So I'm in the same boat as you. I have no idea. But when y- you talk to people, hey, what do they have to offer? I still don't understand what, because
Hmm.
usually, how they get, if you attack their positions, they get defensive. And they usually call you, you're imperialist, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
I do think that they may think that life would be better. I don't know how, but you definitely know like the propaganda effects of Twitter and all of that stuff, social
Yeah.
media, TikTok, out there, the algorithms are used to pretty much promote whatever they want. And this is where you usually get the glorious empire and all, and people do tend to fall for it because it's a lot easier
Yeah.
to picture prosperity when you're going to be under the influence of Russia. But people tend to
Yeah.
forget that the countries that were under the influence of Russia, Eastern Europe and all of that stuff, they were not happy about this. And there were a lot of them were in the gulags in Siberia.
Yeah.
So it's not
It,
a
it,
fun existence.
it seems to be a case where we always, I think that happens in every society where we forget the past
Yeah.
and we kind of color it in a more positive brush than it really is. It's
Yep.
interesting. So Slovenia is part of the EU, it's part of NATO,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And has now the conversation changed? You mentioned before, uh, people didn't want to spend that much on the military. Do people now want to spend more on the military, given what's happened, or is it the same?
I think it's mostly the same. It has changed a little bit where we're spending now, I think 1.4% of GDP on the military. And before, I think at the worst times, we spent like 0.89% on GDP, and most of it was going into salaries, right? So that was
Yeah.
pretty much non-existent. I do think I haven't been in contact with that many of my peers and stuff like that. But before, I can tell you when I was in the military, there was a big West-East divide, 100%.
Yeah. That's interesting. I was actually reading an article in the FT about when Trump came into power and he literally joined a lot of these NATO meetings and he forced everyone to increase their spending on NATO. Otherwise, the
Yeah.
US would leave NATO. So it feels like Trump kind of really had an impact actually on expenditure on NATO as a percentage of GDP in in the European countries.
He did up to a point, but I do think that the biggest impact was the Russian invasion. Like that one just like skyrocketed it, right? And I would just like kind of like also say that when we're talking about the expenditure, and when we're talking about the GDP, right, 2%, 1.5%, whatever, we kind of still need to put also the help that every country is giving to Ukraine, because usually, let's say Germany, I don't think that they actually input their spending towards the Ukrainian military in their actual GDP. So I think that that's actually a lot higher than it would, like, at least I would put it in as the official, GDP for defense, even though it goes to Ukraine, which it should legitimately. Like, one of my opinions is I still don't understand what European countries are doing with their stocks of ammunition and equipment, because legitimately it was built to fight Russia. You have
Mm.
Ukraine fighting Russia. We don't need our equipment because Russia is not capable of invading any other country. Like, yeah,
So you feel, so what you're
yeah,
saying
yeah,
is that the European countries have a lot of ammunition, have a lot of equipment that they're not sending to Ukraine that they should be sending to Ukraine.
yeah. So I don't know about the ammunition. I think that with ammunition, especially like with the artillery rounds, where we don't have that much, unfortunately, because we never had a lot. But let's say specifically tanks, aircraft, and all of that stuff. Yes, of course, we do need to have something reserved specifically planes and stuff. But like countries that are not bordering anybody, like let's say here I'm going to say Slovenia, we don't have a lot, but any like armor, APCs, and everything else like that, just send it. Germany as well. sorry, but Russia is not going to invade you via the North Sea, because they, like, we've seen it in Ukraine that they can't even cross like a 20-meter wide river or like a pond, and they get smacked. Like, trust me, they will not send an invading force of ships
Yeah.
into northern
Do you
Germany
feel?
because they're going to get smacked.
Yeah. Do you feel they're not doing that because they're worried that it would increase the speed of which we would say officially we have World War III? Is that the reason you think why they're not fully sending everything?
Yeah, I think it has to do with that, and I call it BS, escalation management. It's like we're legitimately giving ourselves red lines. We're not going to do this so that, Putin, that we're not doing that, right? And this has been happening since, what, 08, when Putin invaded Georgia, pretty much. And we've
Yeah.
always had this escalation management. And I think one of the big changes was, I don't know if you remember in 2013 when there was the crisis in Syria. And at one point that Obama said pretty much the red line is that nerve gas or sarin, I think it was, or something like that. If you do this,
Mm.
there's going to be consequences. And then as soon as Assad did this, it was backtracking, right? And this is what Putin then thought, hey, you guys are always backtracking. And what you were implying at the beginning, right? Everybody was surprised. And I was surprised how fast Europe actually put in the sanctions. They stopped like getting the gas and pretty much everything, right? That was like a shock to everybody here. And I do think that we are just tying our hands behind our back and also doing the same thing for Ukraine. With the most stupidest thing ever is Ukraine can't attack on Russia's land with all of its weapons. Russia can. They can use North Korean weapons, Iranian weapons, some hybrid, probably Chinese, like dual component weapons and stuff like that. But no, God forbid Ukraine, you can't attack their airfields from which they're
Yeah.
lobbing the bombs at you.
It puts difficulty for Ukraine to fight. I guess the worry of the U.S. is when U.S. weapons will be used to attack Russian soil. That, I guess, they're worried, right? They're scared that this would result in a bigger conflict than it already is.
Yeah. So here is where, we can go into a little bit of technicalities, right? Russian soil, based on the annexation of Putin and his cronies of the 4 southern regions of Ukraine. So Crimea, the Donbass, right? And like the Novorossiya, that's Russian land. And they've been hitting it with American ATACMS and European scalps, storm shadows. So in that case, Russia's already been attacked with Western weapons. But in my opinion, like, I would just switch the narrative around. It's like, we're giving the ammo and stuff to Ukraine. We don't care how they use it. They use it the way they want to. Or if, people are afraid of escalation management, cool, okay, you can attack Russia on Russian soil, amazing. Then Russia can't attack Ukraine from Russian soil, and they can't use Iranian weapons, North Korean weapons. If they do, give Ukraine free hands. And that would be escalation management. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the current, like, did this morning that Russia attacked like the children's hospital, right?
I read about that.
Yeah. A day before a NATO summit.
Hmm.
It's legitimately every single time something like this, like some big summit happens, it's the same freaking thing. And nobody's going to tell me that there was a military thing at the hospital, because it wasn't, right? And we're not doing anything. What usually with dictators like Putin and the Slavic and regimes, and also if you look at the history, is might makes right. If you're not going to stop me, then it means you're allowing me to do this, and I'm going to encroach slowly. What we're doing is actually really counterproductive. We are limiting ourselves. We're not telling Putin, hey, if you cross this, this is what's going to happen, right? And legitimately, in my opinion, it would be, okay, cool. You attack the hospital, amazing. Ukraine, you can attack the airfields, because those are the Kinjal missiles that mostly struck, because Ukraine can't just hit them with that accuracy.
Why do you think the West is not putting in these like red lines? Yeah.
Oh, that's $100 question or $1 million question. Yeah, I think that actually what you alluded to, we're really afraid of escalating to World War III, which in essence, like you said, we're already there, at least a precursor to it. And we're trying to be a democracy, I think that like, hey, we're, better than they are. Like we are more, we have integrity, we have honor and all of that. Unfortunately, yes, we can have this, but Russia doesn't. They're killing the POWs, they're killing children, they're killing civilians, they don't care, right? Because for them, the only end goal is we want Ukraine because we want their resources, and Putin wants to be the new Peter the Great or something. And
Yeah.
for
So
us,
this is an interesting
yeah,
point. Yes. So to interrupt,
go ahead.
but there's this. If you speak to a Russian, right, the argument is, which I've heard a lot, is that
Mhm.
we had assurance. The Russians had assurances from the West that NATO will not kind of expand beyond the wall of Germany, right? And that was one of the reasons why Russia left. And slowly, you've seen NATO kind of expand all the way to, it was close to actually having Ukraine as being part of
Mhm.
NATO. And so for Russia, obviously, if you look at it from their perspective, its national security is what matters to them. And so you see this kind of like NATO coming to your borders.
Mhm.
I guess you have to have a red line yourself of, if they cross that line, then it's too dangerous for us. We need to react to it. What's your thoughts about that?
Y- y- Yes, on that. Sorry, but because so if we look at this, like, right, yeah, I mean, NATO is not encroaching into it. And the first thing is, I think that Gorbachev even said that there was no agreement that, NATO is not going to be enlarging itself into the to the east. The other
It,
thing
it was
is,
like
when we're looking at NATO, yeah,
informal assurances,
yeah,
apparently.
yeah, ki-
Yeah.
okay, kind of like that. But then it was like, what, in 89, 90 or something like that, when the Berlin Wall fell, and the Soviet Union at that point was
Mm.
still like. And the one thing that with NATO we need to understand is that NATO doesn't. It's not invading other countries. Other countries want to join NATO. They have to have referendums, and all of the other NATO countries need to approve that they actually become, right? And that was with the Baltic states, with Slovenia, with pretty much every country, and now the last one, Sweden and Finland, right? And if you're looking at like specifically security of Russia, it's kind of like a folly, because before the war, Ukraine, as far as I understand it, the majority of Ukrainians didn't want to join NATO, if I remember the polls correctly. And even the Finns, the Swedes, didn't want to. And NATO only had like, and NATO and Russia had like a really small border between them. Well, guess what now? Finland is a big country, and it has a big border with Russia, right? And even if all of these arguments, okay, they're not true, right? Let's look at the Kaliningrad enclave there, right? If NATO was really that encroaching and really that threatening, um,
Where is that? Sorry.
Russia would not. Kaliningrad, that's the enclave between Poland and I think Latvia or Lithuania, like that small Russian land that they have in the
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Baltic
Yeah.
Sea.
That's online.
Yeah,
Poland.
that
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they had, I think it's the 11th Corps was there, the Russian, with a lot of air defense and stuff. Well, guess where that 11th Corps is? It was mauled in, I think, in the south of Ukraine, and most of the air defense has already gone into Ukraine. So that means that, yeah, Russia is not looking at NATO as being a really big threat, because you wouldn't be withdrawing all of your troops into Ukraine. And the same thing with the Finnish in the Finnish borders, right? Where I think that their Finnish chief of staff said that 80% of the Russians have left there. So that means that they see the border with NATO as safe, that NATO is not going to attack. So that's kind of like the fallacy of that argument, at least in my opinion.
Fair enough. What do you see the solution to this? I guess there's two options, right? The Ukrainians continue fighting, which I think it seems like will go on for years, or to accept what has happened and go for peace, which is a difficult thing to do, because that means you're accepting the loss of those large chunks of
Mhm.
land. But at least it brings peace. Which one do you think is more likely to happen?
Uh, so it's going to depend, to be honest, unfortunately, a lot on the elections that is going to happen in November in the US. What I really want is that Ukraine goes to its 1991 borders, because that's going to be the only safe solution. If we allow Russia
And what is the
yeah.
1991 border? So what's that? What borders are that?
So Crimea is Ukrainian. All of the Donbass is Ukrainian. It was pretty much before 2014, the invasion of Crimea that happened, right? Because if you leave what a lot of people say, hey, current situation, what's going to happen is you have a ceasefire. So Ukraine loses 20% of its land, and one of the most fertile lands and one of the most resource intensive lands. So in terms of minerals and stuff, it gives Russia just the time to rebuild its military. And they're going to do it again. It's not that Russia hasn't done it. I think in terms of when Putin came to power in 2000, so he's been in power for 24 years now. I think Russia had like 3 years of peace. It just comes back from first Georgia, then, Syria to get the warm seaport that they want in, I forgot the name of the Syrian coast. But then Crimea, Sevastopol, and all of that, another warm seaport in the Black Sea. And then Donbass, and then, either the great imperialistic Russia that we want. And they wouldn't stop there, unfortunately, if they conquer Ukraine. I do believe that they would go further, or at least try.
It is interesting and worrying at the same time.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your kind of military experience. Do you feel now, given what's happening, that more people should join the military?
Yeah. So my position was always a little bit different, probably than with most of the people. I do think that we still should have conscription in any case, even like 10 years ago. It's to have at least 2
Why
or
is that?
3 months. Because I do think that, well, first, people do need to understand how to defend themselves. And again, if we're looking at it right now, right, is first what the military does, it kind of gives you some sort of discipline and just understanding of what, you can bring to society. Because that's not only like, hey, we're going to teach you how to kill. It's also, hey, we're going to teach you how to be a better person. And I do believe that I'm a better person because I was in the military.
Better person in terms of in
That
what
part,
way?
I understand who I am now. I did get honor and integrity, and I'm talking about the military academy, about who I was, what I am, and I know how to stand up for myself and what I do believe in, even though people may not like it. And also it kind of builds character. It's like, hey, look at what other people are doing for you. And like, people that are in the military right now, a lot of like people that haven't been in the military, they don't understand how actually hard that is. And if you put them in that position, first, you're going to teach them a bunch of new skills. And then they're also going to be more, how to say, they're going to be more appreciative of what people actually do, right? It's not going to be like, hey, we don't need the military until you actually need it. So that's kind of like the funniest thing when I'm talking to people, right? It's like, hey, we don't need the military now. We're in peace. But yeah, what happens when you're not in peace? And the answer was like, well, then you can get the military. It's like, it doesn't work like that. You need to build it for 15, 20 or more years to actually, until then, it needs to be prepared. And this is where, when we're coming back to % of GDP into military spending is so important, because the military can rot for a long time, but you can't just then say like, hey, 10% of GDP goes to defense, and next year I'm going to have the best military. It doesn't work like that. You need to really spend a lot of time into building it, right? And unfortunately, I do think that one of the things with conscription is we're coming back several decades into what's in the national interest, how can we defend ourselves? Because professional armies, unfortunately, are not going to do it, especially in like Europe, where legitimately like the Russian and probably Ukrainian combined losses are more than every other country in Europe has, the amount of their militaries combined.
Yeah. There's no kind of secret button that you can press where you suddenly have the military done and ready, right? It takes years to train and get ready. But also, like, it's that point of, when we kind of go through these challenges, which you will go through in the military, you do appreciate things more. You have more skills. You get to know yourself. And, there is this argument that life is, more comfortable than before. In some sense, it is not. But the serious kind of challenges, the physical challenges, we don't get to experience that on a daily basis, especially physical challenges, unless like you work on a farm or something like that. You're not going to experience those challenges. Now it's all kind of mental challenges. You still need those things.
But we're talking about, so one of the things that I kind of didn't mention, I also went to U.S. Army Ranger School. And whoever knows or not, that's usually where infantry officers go. It's kind of like a light special operation forces, kind of like training. And when you're talking about physical and mental, legitimately 80% of it is mental, but physical is 20%, right? But it's still a big chunk of it is how do you deal with that adversity when everything is hurting? Let's say for me, it was like I was having like 1.5 hours sleep per day for like 60, 61 days. And it's like, how do you mentally prepare yourself to push through? Right. And this is what we've pretty much lost, right? I'm just going to turn on Netflix and then
It's
I'm
that
going to complain.
adversity.
I'm tired and stuff like that. Yeah.
What has been, so how many years were you in the military?
So excluding being at the military academy, which was for 4 years, I was in the military for 5
years. What was the toughest moment there?
For me, it was the realization that I'm going to have to leave the military. And why I'm saying this is because, ever since I went to West Point, I wanted to become a general chief of staff, in the Slovenian military. And when I got back to the Slovenian military, it was, the thing that we were talking before, East-West divide. The situation in Slovenia at that point changed where it was more pro-Yugoslavian, pro-Eastern people got into.
What year was that?
So that was 2012. 2012, 2013. Yeah. And one of the hardest things was, I was officially a recognized second lieutenant in all of NATO. The only country that didn't want to accept my commission was the Slovenian military. So I had to go back into officers training, basic officers training, until they actually gave me the rank of a lieutenant. Which,
why didn't they
it was kind of like, here, I think it was politics. The first time they saw me, it was like, oh yeah, you're the American. I was like, no, I'm a Slovenian that went to an American military school. And this is where the relationship kind of ended. It began, it's like, yeah, you're nothing, like we have to reset all of your knowledge from the US and you have to become a real Slovenian officer, which I still don't understand what a real Slovenian officer in quotation marks is, like even to this day. But a lot of it was political. Two people didn't want me, or probably more didn't want me to get a commission right away, even though, every other NATO country, like I was officially an officer. In Slovenia, I wasn't. And it started with there, right? It was like, I'm going to have a really hard path if I want to be an officer and like a general in the end. And then, with more and more years that passed, well, it was only 5 years. It was like every single time I could never get either promoted, go anywhere else, and it was just like, hey, what are you going to do? You need to stay in the military because you don't have any other options. That was legitimately what my battalion commander said. It was like, you don't have any other options. You're either going to like it or, you're not going to like it. It doesn't matter. And that's legitimately like that conversation. And I still remember it, that I had with my battalion commander was when I said like, hey, I'm leaving the military. See you guys. And I left the military, I think like a year later or something like that. Yeah.
And so you're saying it was all politics that really led to this?
Most of it. And I do have an annoying feature, especially for a Slovenian officer, which is I have my own opinions and I am not afraid to tell them. Even like if somebody's wrong, I will tell you this. And it doesn't bode well in the Slovenian military, especially when we're talking about higher officers. Usually a lower ranking officer will not tell a high ranking officer that he thinks they're wrong.
So you've had a bit of experience, I guess, in the American. You've had experience in the military in America and the Slovenian military. What do you feel is the biggest difference between both militaries?
Definitely, I would say why people join the military. That was one of the biggest things. Is in the U.S., people join the military, at least initially, because they want to defend their country and they really want to do some good. In Slovenia, people join the military because it's a means to an end to get a salary, pretty much. Not all of them, of course, There definitely are exceptions with officers and all of that stuff, and some soldiers as well. But at the moment, the majority that they join because they have a stable employment, stable paycheck. And, when they get deployed to Kosovo, or right now I think they're there in the Baltics, they get a really nice bump in their pay without any taxes, right? In the U.S. military, people actually do join because they're patriotic and all of that.
About Europe's safety and security?
Yes, somewhat. I was a lot more concerned like 2 years ago, but as we were talking about it, kudos to Europe, the EU, and everybody else that actually understood the big security threat that Russia had, and now we're actually, we have NATO and Europe, and I think we have like 300,000 people or something like that in the Baltics right now, give or take. I'm not sure how many like NATO troops and stuff like that, and we've taken this threat seriously. So I was concerned more in 2022 than I am right now, because I think we are going into the right direction. Yeah. And I think we're going to go into, like, we're going to continue there if the will is going to be there, right? So if we're looking at, unfortunately, it is going a little bit slowly in the production part of weapons and all of that, but I never would have thought that we would be giving like tens of billions of euros to military production companies pretty much for ammunition and all of that, like in 2022. That would be almost like a fantasy, which is actually coming true right now.
So I'd like to ask, what do you feel is the biggest challenge that society will be facing in the next 5 to 10 years?
Cool. I actually do think if we go into it in terms of the war, that we're going to stay behind Ukraine and actually make sure that Russia doesn't win. Because I do think that if Russia wins, it's going to have way more consequences than anybody imagines, because unfortunately, China is watching, and there's a little island there that's called Taiwan. And if we lose interest, let's say in the next 6 months or a year, that's 4 or 5 years that probably China is thinking like, hey, we can live with those sanctions for 4 or 5 years, and then we're going to have Taiwan, which has a lot of chips and all of that, which would legitimately put a lot of resources under totalitarian regimes, which I don't think we want it to happen. So this is the biggest thing, I think, in terms of security that we're actually facing, is because in democracies, usually we're not so far out looking, because, hey, we have elections every 4 years and politicians need to get reelected. And usually, unfortunately, in totalitarian regimes, they don't have that problem. They can look 10, 15 years forward as long as their internal stability is not compromised. The thing that I'm really, really afraid.
That's the benefits of dictatorships.
Yeah.
You get that.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Blaz, it was great speaking to you. Thank you so much. This was a very insightful conversation. And hopefully we'll connect again very soon.
Yes.
Cheers.
Thank you, Hadi. I had a wonderful time. Bye.